A Tiny Revolution features adults having adult conversations, which means adult language is probably going to be present, just so you know. Before we get into the podcast today, I just wanted to talk a little bit about why I'm doing this podcast. You know what I love more than making queer Christian content? It's actually connecting with people like you, queer Christians and allies from across the country who are learning what it is to be fearlessly authentic humans, what it is to wrestle with our faith, and what it is to ask the question and not always have the answer. It's been an amazing few years of blogging and podcasting and now jumping on the YouTube train. And it's just been 2 years, and because of the support I've had, we, not just me, but we have been able to reach thousands of people with a good word about who they are and how God loves them. And that's why this month I've been asking folks to join me in making more possible. So if you haven't heard already, or if you don't know, I'm looking for 100 people to join me in creating content at $7 a month. We've had 10 folks join up to become sustaining partners for the coming month, which is incredible, and I'm so thankful, but it is far from the goal that I set. And maybe that goal is a bit lofty, but you know what? So is trying to change the world. So what's that money going to exactly? Improved quality through hopefully buying a new camera and a new mic for the podcast, a little bit of help through podcast editing, and maybe some new software for video and for audio editing. Because we all know that quality products are the thing that kind of like make a difference in media, right? Plus, if you subscribe as a patron at $7 a month, you'll also be subscribed to a new project I'm starting called the Reconnect Devo, or the Reconnect Devotional if you want to go old school with it, but I wanted to make it sound cute. Either way, the Reconnect Daily Devotional is going to be a daily practice going straight to your inbox. It's a great way to reconnect with your practices surrounding scripture or prayer or meditation, or maybe this is something that you've never started before and you want to get some new spiritual practices. Either way, I'm very excited about writing this. I've been working on it for the past month, and it's been one of the biggest projects I've undertaken, and I know it's going to be enriching for you because, honestly, as I've been working through this stuff, it's been enriching for me. So, not only are you getting something, but you're also giving something. You are helping fund the work of creating LGBTQ Christian content, which is helping other people get a good word about their lives, learn more about scripture, theology, a new way of looking at faith, and a new way of engaging with the hard questions that maybe they haven't started to engage with. So, if you want to learn more about that, if you want to become a patron, if you want to support the work of really helping people live better lives, go to patreon.com/thekevingarcia and learn more about becoming a patron today. And thank you so much again for all your support. Hey there, my name is Kevin Garcia, and you're listening to A Tiny Revolution, a podcast featuring conversations with ordinary people who are living revolutionary lives. Welcome to episode 37. I'm so glad you decided to join me today, and I'm just going to go ahead and just jump in. I don't have a really lot to report besides, if you were following me on social media, you know I got my laptop stolen over the weekend, over Pride weekend in Atlanta, which is horrible, and either way, I got a new laptop, thankfully, because my insurance company is dope, and they were so shout out to USAA for that. And I have a lot to get done in the next couple of days because I'm so far behind on my creative work. But I'm so thankful for you coming and hanging out with me today, because today I've got my friend Emily Joy on the podcast. She is a dream come true, and a good friend. We've known each other since before we both came out. We'll get into that in our conversation. But I'm excited to share this conversation with you. Anyways, just dates coming up. Reformation Project is this coming week, October 26th through the 28th. If you're in Chicago, if you're going to be there, please say hello to me. I'll be working with Reformation Project, probably doing a little bit of social media, a little bit of video, and anything else they really ask me to do. So if you're around, I want to hang out with you. I want to say hello. I want to grab a coffee or something like that. So yeah, hit me up on the Twitter or the Facebook or something and let's chat, okay? Then the next big thing coming up is January, the GCN National Conference. It's going to be in Denver at the end of January. If you are someone who's looking to do some workshops, those applications are due November 1st. So go ahead, knock those out, because it's coming up faster than you think. Especially because your Halloween plans, that's what you're really focused on right now. So take some time, knock those out, and I'll see you in January. Oh, and I'm leading worship with Tash Holmes and Deanna Calhoun and Gabriel Mudd this year. Again, I feel super pumped about that, so you're not going to want to miss this year. It's going to be incredible. So let me jump into telling you about my friend Emily Joy. Emily and I connected way back before either one of us had come out, when I was kind of first trying to make my YouTube channel happen. And she and I became really fast friends and have just kind of grown in our affection for one another over the years. She's a spoken word poet, a yoga teacher in training, and a creative justice enthusiast. Most days you can find her at home in Nashville, writing and dreaming about how to help others, especially other badass women, make spiritual and creative progress in the wake of religious trauma, painful past experiences, and self-doubt. She chases this dream through poetry, blogging, videos, and soon, yoga. She's passionate about this work because, like many of you, for the first 20-odd years of her life, she spent in conservative religious environments that didn't look too kindly on things like doubt, or asking questions, or going against the status quo, or making mistakes, or having a body, or drinking alcohol, kissing other humans, affirming other religions, watching movies that said the word damn. I mean, like, that's oddly specific, but yeah, we get it. As funny as that some of that seems now, it can leave a lot of us with serious scars, hang-ups, and even trauma. She's been there, we all have been there, and she's still on the journey, but she is such an amazing person, and she is so vulnerable in how she shares this stuff. About this conversation, we talk about how she's still bisexual, even though she's married to a dude, what's changed in the world since we first came out 2 years ago. We talk about the Reformation, we talk about the Bible. We really, really spread the conversation out over a bunch of different topics, and I think you're going to love it. Just a note about the recording, the quality on my end is not as good as I'd like it to be because I used a friend's new mic when recording it, and it wasn't synced up with my recorder, and it was a little annoying, and blah, blah, blah. Either way, you can hear it, it's fine, and that's what's important, right? So, settle into the conversation with my friend Emily Joy, and I'll see you in just a minute, boo.
Well, because the last time we did like an interview, I wasn't out. Were you even out?
I was just on the verge of coming out, so
okay, so
not
neither
quite
of us
there.
was out.
That's true. Neither one of us was out last time we chatted. How interesting.
That's really sweet. Way to go,
Yeah.
us.
High five us. Okay, so for people who don't know your work or who you are, give us like a little snapshot of what do people need to know about Emily Joy?
Okay. So I am I'm a spoken word poet. I am about to be a yoga teacher. I do social media for a nonprofit here in town, so I wear like a whole bunch of different hats. But I like it that way. I go to an Episcopal church now, but I would say I struggle with belief, but I like church.
Which is interesting because it's most people just like they don't struggle with belief, but they hate church, which is so interesting.
I know. Well, I do everything backwards. But no, I say this as a joke, but it's kind of true. Like, I just like a place to like bring casseroles, you know? I'm like, do I have to believe anything to bring a casserole? No? Great. Then I will be there. And I don't know. Just, when you find there's good places. And so when you find them, I feel like it's good to hold on to them if you can. But that's not always been my story. I grew up, very conservative. My dad was a Baptist youth minister when I was born, but he ended up kind of starting his own nonprofit, and we sort of traveled a lot for him to speak. So we kind of went to all kind of different churches growing up. Not like mainline churches, and not Catholic, but we kind of got like the whole, like, full, conservative Protestant experience, I would say. Like, we went to non-denominational churches, we went to, really charismatic churches, we went to like, Methodist churches out in the middle of the country, like all these different kinds of churches. The church that was really formative for me during high school was like a non-denominational evangelical megachurch. So we sort of got it all, the good and the bad.
Yeah.
And then I went to Moody Bible Institute for college, and I have a degree from there. It's a piece of paper that says that I am certified for Christian ministry.
Congratulations.
I know. I always I don't think this is what they meant. But I feel like I'm still doing it, so it's still on my wall.
Yo, way to go. Way to certified for Christian ministry.
Mm-hmm.
It's so nuts. And then I guess so how did you find your way into your spoken word poetry? Like how did that come about?
So that was a thing. I mean, I'd always been writing poetry since I was a kid. I was like a really precocious nerdy kid, and I did a lot of writing. And so I always wrote poetry. And then in college, I was in a poetry club with like 3 or 4 other people. It was really small. And Micah Bournet was in that poetry club. I don't know. A lot of people know him. He does spoken word also, and has done a lot of things with like the Justice Conference and a few other places. But he was in that poetry club. We were in school together and introduced me to spoken word. And I was like, this is a really great art form. And like, this feels like a thing that I could do. And so I tried it and I really liked it. And then I started like performing it at like different poetry events at school and stuff. And like people really responded well to it. And I was like, oh, like this is a way that I can finally be cool for once in my life.
It's just like poetry can be cool again.
Yeah.
Not that it wasn't ever not cool, but you know.
But I mean, like sonnets and stuff, it's hard to make a sonnet cool, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was kind of that. And so I've just been doing it ever since.
Wow. And it's led you to some very interesting spaces too. Like, I think like, I'm trying to remember, like, I think I found you like through Micah J. Murray on Twitter, and then like found your stuff, and that's when I was like experimenting with YouTube. But just like, I remember like when you first recorded All Daughters and Sons, and that was just like kind of like mind blowing to me that there was someone like you were like one of the first people I think I met like on the outside of evangelical world, because I wasn't even outside of that yet.
Yeah.
And I guess like it's been 2 years since our first conversation. Like, what's it been like for the past 2 years for you, growing up and kind of changing and having your own kind of like not awakening. I feel like you were already there, but just like so much has happened in the past 2 years.
Yeah. Oh my God. It's very much like it's that sense of like exponential growth where it's like it snowballs and it's like more and more and more. Yeah, so much has happened in the last 2 years. God. Yeah, it's been a really interesting journey since that. Not just so I think the 2-year release date of All Prodigal Daughters and Sons, either it's coming up or it just passed. I think it just passed because I remember we did the Kickstarter for it in the fall. And I think I put it out that next summer. So I think it just passed. But yeah, so, I mean, it's interesting. I think, I don't know if you find this to be true when you're like creating content that is intended for public consumption, that like it takes, like by the time that I get what I'm trying to say out there, like I don't always agree with it anymore.
Yeah. It's like being somebody who creates content online, you have like a front row seat to your own development, because it's because I was looking back at like my my first ebook that I put out right when I came out of the closet.
Yeah.
And I was reading through some of it. I'm just like, holy shit. Like, there was like a whole thing about, I actually, like, I wrote this and it was in public and it's been public for so long. This is like, I actually think like sex should be saved for 2 people who are married. And I'm just like, I
know. I remember reading that. I remember the part and I was like, that's actually, okay, talk about things that I do backwards. I gave up that belief first, before anything else. A lot of people give up that one last.
Yeah, it was, and I think like it came with time, like,
yeah.
And like trying to be like nuanced and like not scare everybody off at the same time, but then at the same time still trying to be true to who you are and like your process.
Yeah.
And you know, and even in that, like I think at least for me, I don't know if this is true for you, but like there's something it's almost like my heart understands things before my mind does. Like, I know what I believe before I can articulate it, or even like back it up biblically, because that's always like the milestone for so many people is like, is it biblical? Can you back it up with scripture? And I'm like,
ugh, that part is like, that's so hard for me, because I'm like, okay, like I never know how to have that conversation, because I'm like, one, like I have to, like, do you want me to show you my degree from Moody Bible Institute? Like, yes, I could if I wanted to, but the other thing is that, like, I'm not necessarily, like, I'm hesitant to have that conversation, because I'm not necessarily sure that that's the way that we should be modeling how to use the Bible. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I'm like, we could have that conversation. If you want to get down with the Greek, like, we can get down into the Greek and talk about how this word doesn't actually mean this, and like, this is a mistranslation from the KJV, and like, we could get like down to the nitty gritty about it. But I don't want to model using the Bible that way, because I'm like, I don't want to model using the Bible in such a way that like we have to have a proof text for everything that we do and don't approve of in life. I don't think that's how it's meant to be used. And so I always hesitate with that, because I understand how important that the apologetics aspect of that is for a lot of people, especially as they're making their transition out of, conservative evangelicalism into more liberating ways of thinking about spirituality. Like, I get that the biblical backup piece is important, but I'm like, it concerns me, because I don't want us to stay there. I'm like, ultimately we have to get around to getting to the back end of the Bible, so to speak, and say, is this even really how we want to use this?
Yeah, I think that was a big thing for me. And I honestly, like, weirdly enough, it was like in the past 2 years, like, coming out, kind of developing a lens for racial justice, developing a lens for intersectional feminism, and just intersectional justice in general, I think has been super powerful and wonderful. But at the same time, it's also like, it's almost like you're playing two different games with people. So like, a lot of you're like the proverbial you. At least a lot of my friends, how it was like, they need the biblical case for everything, they need the biblical understanding. So I think a lot of us have made ourselves biblical experts. Oh, hi, puppy.
Yeah. Sorry.
I feel like a lot of us have made ourselves like biblical experts because we need to make ourselves biblical experts so that we're legitimate. But at the same time, it's almost like we don't always view scripture in the same light as we used to, because for so long, for me, it was like the Bible is inerrant and there was a literal 7-day creation, and that was the view, like the view from which I was like moving. And then kind of like developing new ideas, new senses of spirituality, looking for truth, not just in like the stories found in the Bible, but like looking for the truth below the truth, you know?
Well, and I think when you get to that level of analysis, you start to realize that like the demand for biblical evidence in the face of people's suffering almost, to me, represents a lack of empathy. When I say like, hey, XYZ thing about justice, whether it's like sexual justice or racial justice, and somebody's like, please show me where you see this in the Bible. It's like that, to me, that portrays like a fundamental lack of ability to be empathetic with other human beings' experiences. And I'm like, and that's the hard part, because that's not a thing that you can write. You can't write a book about that. Like, you can't really teach people to care about other people's experiences. You can teach them that the Bible doesn't mean X, Y, Z, but like ultimately we have to get beyond that question.
Yeah. And I think that's something that like Jesus taught and like modeled for so many people. Like, it's because the law says don't touch anybody who's unclean. Yet Jesus was constantly touching lepers.
Yeah.
Jesus said, like, the Bible said, don't mix with other people.
You've heard it said, but I tell you.
Yeah, that's exact thing. And like, I think that that's going to be like a fundamental thing. And like Pastor Nadia Boltz-Weber said a really dope thing at Wild Goose. I don't know if you remember it, but she said that the big Reformation is probably not going to come as a means of being more deeply theological, but more deeply pastoral. Like, who is the person in front of me? What is the thing that I need to do to make sure that they are living a fruitful, healthy, fulfilling life as kind of people who carry these teachings with us?
Well, the real revolution is going to happen, Reformation is going to happen at the 500-year anniversary of the Protestant Reformation next month.
Come through.
Then we get all of the think pieces about 95 theses for the modern church. Ugh. I'm going to come up. We should come up with a bingo board.
Oh my 95. Gosh.
Can we do that?
For like both sides for like.
Yeah,
like
I feel like it'd be safer than a drinking game. Because if we came up with a drinking game, we'd probably die of alcohol poisoning. But if we came up with a bingo board.
Yeah. What a way to go, though. You know? It's like, I'm like, just leave a note. Just like, if you find me dead with a bingo card in my hand.
Please no, it was because I read too many Gospel Coalition articles.
Oh my gosh. The Gospel Coalition. I still haven't been blocked by them, and I'm so mad. I've been trying so hard. I really have. Apparently not hard enough. Maybe what I should do is I should hate follow them and just keep responding until they block me.
Probably.
Yeah. To pivot ever so slightly, one thing that has developed for both you and for me over the past 2 years has been our coming out stories. Like I came out as gay, and I'm kind of moving towards more identifying as queer in many ways. And you proudly identify as a bisexual woman.
Yes. I had somebody interviewed me for an article that just came out a few days ago. And in the article, I don't know if you follow Sarah Posner on Twitter, but she was the journalist who wrote it. But in the article, she said something about Emily Joy, now 26, and an out bisexual living in Nashville. And I was like, I guess that's my title now, an out bisexual.
So did you, this is basically like asking about like, when did you know that you were bisexual? And then, I guess, follow up to that, going into your marriage, was that a part of the trepidation?
Yeah. When did you know? So like one of my like deepest vices and also deepest loves is the Bachelor franchise. And always at the end, man, like they always bring out the person that they like left at the altar, and their question to them is always like, when did you know? When did you know you weren't going to pick me? It's really emotional. I know. It's terrible. But that's what that reminded me of. But no, so it's funny, you know, a lot of people have these stories of like, I always sort of knew this about myself, and it was just this thing that I pushed down. Man, I was genuinely freaking surprised by myself. And like it sounds really like naive to say like it just wasn't a thing that had occurred to me previously, but it wasn't. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I think one of the reasons is that I think our brain sort of tries to like cushion us from things that would be deeply harmful to us. And I think myself, you know, like it was hard to come out like after already being married, but like as hard as that was, I feel like based on the faith communities that I grew up in, it would have been a whole lot harder if I had known that about myself when I was like 16, you know, like, so to me, I'm like, I think part of it is just like, I think our brain does try to like protect us from things. So thank you, brain. But I think too, part of it is just like, so like in purity culture, which this is like sort of also pivoting, this is a whole other tangent that we can get on, but like, in all of the purity culture literature, right? Like all the books, almost none of them ever mention non-heteronormative sexuality. Like they're so always also about like, don't have sex, don't look at pornography, don't lust, don't make out, like whatever it is, right? But there's not, like the vast majority of the books have either nothing to say about non-heteronormative sexuality, or they have like one quick appendix at the end with like a pray the gay away sort of success story. And that's like as much as is ever devoted to it in the literature. And I was like heavily steeped in purity culture. And so I think to me, part of it was just the fact that like, it wasn't really an option. Like it was never a thing that was considered possible, I guess.
Yeah. It's almost like you were conditioned to, this is how my sexuality is supposed to look.
Yeah.
And this is like the path I'm supposed to take. And so it's almost like I've actually, I know a few women who, and even for myself, like, it took me a while to go from like thinking about like gender, for example, like I'm currently like in the process of like figuring out how my gender expression and what I want to do with that, because like, as you know,
Yeah.
I love painting my nails every now and again.
Yeah.
I love putting on a face, even though I have a beard. And it's a really interesting place, and it's almost like, because now I have the permission to explore these questions about myself, or like my brain is like saying, it's like, okay,
Yeah.
it's finally safe to come out now.
Yeah.
Like
it's funny you mentioned makeup, because ever since I came out, I have worn less makeup than I ever have. Like, I don't think I've worn makeup in like the last month. Because it turns out I don't like it that much. I just really don't enjoy it.
And I think like ever since like
but
a few months ago,
it's that freedom of like feeling like, oh, I can express myself how I want to.
Yeah, and it's being able to, I think seeing yourself is also a big deal. Like seeing people who express themselves in a way that resonates with you, and then after that, it's like, it's almost like I don't know, my friend Brett calls it the privilege of going second.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, because somebody else, it's like the thing in class where the teacher asks a question and then it's like crickets, 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 and nobody says something. And then the first person raises their hand and says a thing. And then after that, it's like a deluge. After that, everybody feels like they can say something. Yeah. Because it just took the one person, like the critical mass in that situation is one. Yeah. No, I definitely like feel that way also. And it's just so interesting. Like, I don't know. It's very interesting.
Do you ever get pushback from people being married to a man and being bisexual, and like being so vocal about being bisexual?
Yeah. I've had a lot of like really interesting conversations with people. I wouldn't call it feedback, but more just like a lot of, so like to continue, like my story is that like I was genuinely surprised by myself when I was, and then of course, after I was like, oh, I'm probably bi. Then I started thinking about like the rest of my life prior to then, and I was like, oh, maybe that's why I got so obsessed with like some of these friendships and like these sorts, like this,
it kind of starts filling in the blanks for certain things in the past.
Then I was like, oh, that kind of makes sense a little bit, like that. And then I was like, then I started looking at old pictures of myself, and I was like, how did I not know? So
that's the same thing too.
Yeah. No, ultimately I got to that place where I was like, okay, this makes sense in like a somewhat coherent narrative of my life. But at the time, like right when I first was like, I'm probably bi, I was like, what? Where did that come from? And so like my husband is like my friend. Like I love him deeply, but like we're also just like, we get along. So I like went home and I told him like, hey, I'm bi, like an hour later, right? Like it wasn't like this thing where I like kept this secret forever and ever. I was like, hey. So he responded really supportively and positively to that. And so after that, and I had a whole bunch of other like, at that same time, I had a bunch of like other personal turmoil going on in my life unrelated to sexuality. So I kind of didn't really get to like process it a whole lot until like several months later. So now it's been what is now, September? So it's been a year and a half since I came out. But I didn't really get to start processing it until about a year ago because I had a bunch of other stuff going on. Right. And so yeah, it was interesting how that came out. So I didn't start writing about it like online until like last winter. Even though I've been out for a few months at that point, and it had taken me that long to like then start and tell like my friends and start having like private conversations with it. But I noticed in that time, from the time that I came out to my husband to the time that I started writing about it, I think one of the reasons that pushed me to finally start writing about it was that I searched the internet for hours. Like I'm one of those people that like if I want to find out like more information about something, I will fall down the bottomless abyss of the internet, like into all kinds of like new articles, and here's this other topic and this totally unrelated thing that I find really fascinating. And then before you know it, I'm like, looking up things about like galaxies and black holes 8 million light years away in space, right? Like that's how I interact with information on the internet. Or I'm like in WebMD thinking I'm going to die, right? Like,
yeah, so same.
Yeah. So, I spent hours on the internet last summer and last fall, like trying to find people who were in my situation, and I couldn't find anyone. Like there was
being a bisexual woman,
being a
and married
bisexual
to
woman
a man.
and married to a man who was supportive of me,
Hmm.
who loved me. Because there was a lot of people who like, I'm bisexual and I came out and my husband was like, I can't be with you anymore, so we're getting divorced, right?
Wow.
And then there was a lot of people who were in like polyamorous relationships, which is fine, but is not like, that's not my story, right?
Yeah, of course.
So I was like, I'm like, my husband's supportive. Like, I'm not trying to divorce him. I love him. But we're also monogamous. And so what does that look like? And particularly, what does that look like coming out of a religiously, sexually repressed environment? Because that adds a whole nother layer to it, right? Because I hadn't ever dated a girl, you know, like, and I had like crushes on girls now as I look back and realize that, but I had never had a girlfriend, you know, this kind of stuff. And so like, so what does that look like coming from like this super repressed environment to be in a monogamous long-term relationship? And then also said, and I was like, nobody's really talking about this, but if bisexuality is valid, then it's valid for me too. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Because our sexuality can't be based on what our current gender of our partner is or what our past gender of our partner is, because otherwise then we would all have no sexuality until we had our first sexual partner, right? Like,
right.
And we know that's not how that works. And there's a whole host of reasons why that's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, if bisexuality is valid, then it's valid for me too.
Come on.
And so it's really interesting. So I started writing about it and I was like, okay, like this is, and part of it was because I wanted to be true to myself, right? Because part of it was a mental health thing. Like there's low levels of mental health associated with not coming out. And like, so part of it was like, I'm trying to be true to myself. I'm trying to be honest about who I am. I went to a lecture at Vanderbilt, last year. There's a woman, her name is Glenn Thomas, and she's a UCC theologian, I believe. But she I think she was married to a man and then came out as lesbian and married a woman. But she posed this question at the lecture that I went to of how addicted am I to white heterosexual Christian approval?
Girl, yes.
And it like haunted me. Like it stuck in the back of my head and I was like, how addicted am I to approval, right? Because I could just say nothing and have people think I'm straight and never subject myself to that kind of scrutiny, right? So that was part of the coming out. But also, as I started to write about it, like, I was texting you last night about this, but like for every one thing that I put out on the internet about bisexuality, I've got a couple of women at least emailing me, being like, that's also my story. I also came from purity culture. I'm married to a dude. I'm bisexual, but like, what's the point of coming out, et cetera, right? Like, this is so many people's stories. And so the more that I started writing about it and the more of those emails that I got, I was like, holy cow, like, this is a huge like thing that is being overlooked in our conversations about sexuality, and people are hungry to be seen in this, you know?
Yeah. Gosh, that's huge. That's so huge. Like, how addicted are you to white heteronormative Christian approval? Because because I feel like for so long in this movement for LGBTQ justice, it's been about kind of appeasing the status quo, you know? Like it's just like, how do we, you know, okay, so we're going to work from the framework that the Bible is inerrant and et cetera, and that's where we're going to work from to get them to like us and approve of us.
Yeah.
And while, that's like a stepping stone to get certain people there, like at the end of the day, like there's so much more. Like, it's again, like you keep saying, we have to be moving beyond these like small trivial things, because at the end of the day, like we've got people out there who are holding on to these secrets that are holding them down like millstones around their neck.
Yep.
And there's like a line from, actually my therapist brought this up in my session this week. She said, you know, we're only as sick as the secrets that we keep, which is something from the 12-step program. And
I love therapy.
I love it. Like I love doing
kale.
I love it like doing a juice cleanse. Because like I know at first like it's gross, and not gross, like it's actually kind of delicious, but I feel like I'm depleted. But then at the end of it, like I feel so much better. So it's it's like the by declaring our secrets, it's like that's the key to other people's freedom. And like I say this a lot is when we tell our story, we set other people free to tell theirs, and we
Yep.
don't know who's seeing the things that we say. Like, you know, I get so
I've
many
been
emails.
so surprised by people who email me, and I'm like you, but like it just goes to show there's no like one type of person that experiences this, you know, like it's across the board.
And it's all types. It's pastors, it's pastors' wives, it's teens, like, you know, sitting in the pews of their church, and like that's why I'm so thankful that like that I've had people who have been cheering me on this whole time, because now like we're creating spaces for other people. And it's nuts. We're actually like in a couple weeks at my house church, we're going to actually talk about sex. Yay. And our sexual ethics, and like, you know, what do we think as a community about this? Like, you know,
you're gonna break up the boys and the girls and have the boys talk about porn and the girls talk about boys.
Yeah, absolutely, because that's the good Christian way to do it. And we're gonna talk about, actually gonna pass out purity rings at the end of it, and have all the girls sign something or whatever. No, but like it's something that we are gonna start discussing, because like our house church is mostly queer and fairly progressive. So it's like, but oddly enough, we still have like little blips of like conservative hangover.
Conservative hangover. It's like a champagne hangover, but worse.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So it's like, you know, how do I get these queer white boys who have grown up in purity culture and still basically, I think it's really interesting, and this is something that I encounter in a lot of like, I guess like queer evangelical circles, or people who have come out of that, is that like people a lot of the time, especially I think it's like in proximity to whiteness and maleness, is like if you still have those privilege areas, you have no reason to question anything else, and so you can still kind of have to be like you're pretty much still like a fundamentalist in every way, except for you think being gay is okay. And even in that, like, and even in that, it's like people don't really have they don't know why they think it's okay. They just know it, which is like beautiful and good and whatnot. But it's like, again, the question of moving beyond stuff is.
Yeah. Well, it's the same impulse behind like, okay, yes. So like marriage between people of various genders is now legal. And there was a lot of people who kind of like stop paying attention after that, because it's like, oh, that's the fight, right? And it's like, no, it's so much bigger than that. It's so much bigger than that. And there's so many other like well, first of all, just like intersecting identities with non-heterosexual marriage. Although I don't like to say like heterosexual marriage or even like gay marriage, because I'm like, my marriage doesn't have an identity. Like people have sexual orientations. I have a sexual orientation. You have a sexual orientation. My marriage is an abstract concept.
That I have assigned meaning to. That culture's assigned meaning to, for which I get a tax break, whatever, right? But like my marriage doesn't have a sexual orientation. So I try to avoid like saying that. But yeah, it's and I think it's a lot of it has to do with both conservatism and like purity culture hangovers from that, because still a lot of people, like I know so many, and I guess because like gay dudes just kind of flock together, and like we're desperately trying to get more queer women in our circles. But like I notice, especially for, I guess it's just my experience, like that purity culture, it doesn't just affect ladies in this scenario. It deeply affects women, probably more adversely than men. But like I think there's a lot of mindsets that are still hung over from purity culture.
Well, it just affects men in a different way. Like men, I feel like get like emotionally and sexually stunted through purity culture teachings, and like the ability to like connect with others in a non-sexual way, I feel like gets stunted.
Oh my gosh, yes.
You know, like it definitely harms men also, just I feel like in a different way. But like it and I think you can see that carry over. I think probably for me, one of the biggest temptations of like trying to be like a person with like, I'm trying to have good theology and like good politics and all this stuff, and it's like, but it's so easy to take the structure of evangelical fundamentalism and replicate it in our progressive circles, but just like have better like voting habits. Basically,
Wow,
I'm
that's
like
a word.
I've got like some better political beliefs now, but like it's still easy for me to like replicate the structure of fundamentalism, and the even the homogeneity of evangelical Christianity. Like it's very easy to carry that over and have technically better like abstract beliefs, but
Mm-hmm.
you know,
But it's just like, what is this? And I think the thing I always kind of come back to is the question of like pastorally,
yeah.
how does this affect the people who are right in front of me? Like,
Mm-hmm.
like what good is it doing for this little house church that I've started? Like, if me and my partner aren't having sex, that's like another thing. Like I heard, so Nadia Boltzbauer, I know I'm like stuck on her right now, so I apologize for like fangirling. But she was in Atlanta, and she during the question and answer session like was talking about purity culture and about how purity culture has affected the lives of her parishioners.
Yeah.
And she kind of posed that question of just like, what good is it for my parishioners if I'm not having sex with my partner?
Yeah.
Or, and I think that we can go even further, like, not like, and I'm not trying to like, again, like, because I guess like when we're playing the game, like we have to have the Bible in there.
Yeah.
Because like I want to ask the question, and like these are questions I've started asking for a while now. Is that like, what is your theology doing in the practical life? And I think that always needs to be the question. Because if you're saying that I need to save my sex till marriage,
yeah,
what good is that doing for people?
Well, and the reality is that the answer to that question is always something. And I think the problem is people think sometimes the answer can be nothing. Like we can separate out people's beliefs from like the effects of those beliefs or their behavior, or like, it's like the impulse besides saying like, oh, like he has all these terrible beliefs and he's like racist and homophobic, but he's a good person. And it's like, okay, but like, you can't separate out somebody's like racist and homophobic beliefs from like their good personness, because their racist and homophobic beliefs are always going to trickle down. There's never going to be a person who has racist and homophobic beliefs who that never bleeds into how they treat other people or how they move through the world, right? And so to me, I'm like, okay, like we're all image bearers, right? Like I don't mean like they don't have value in the eyes of the universe. I mean, like we can't just separate out people's beliefs from their actions, because what you do is what you believe.
Yeah. That's actually like a super, like Bonhoeffer talked about that all the time.
Oh, did he?
Yeah. So like basically Bonhoeffer says in, The Price of Discipleship, or The Cost of Discipleship, which my friend Austin Hartke, Austin suggested it to me and I picked it up and I was like, holy French toast.
I love Austin.
But it was this idea, like Bonhoeffer basically had this opinion that, that if you believe, you will do what Christ says. But if you don't believe, but if you don't do what Christ says, but you say that you believe, you actually don't believe. And I think it's the same thing for anything else.
Not only is that very Bonhoeffer, that's also very Epistle of James.
Yeah, it's the same. And I think that's like, that needs to like, I want that to trickle down into everything else. Just as like, put your body where your politics are, put your money where your mouth is. Like, if you say that you're not racist, prove it.
Yeah. Then don't do racist things. And if you're doing a racist thing, stop doing a racist thing.
Or check yourself, apologize, and keep going. But just like, don't just say, I'm not a racist, I have black friends. No, that's not how this works.
Yeah.
Or like, I'm not homophobic, or I'm not transphobic, or I'm not biphobic, but like,
I just believe the Bible.
I'm just like, oh my gosh, that's the biggest thing. I'm just like, I only want to do what the Bible says. I'm like, bitch, no.
Okay, but I'm like, which Bible? Whose interpretation? Like, I don't
and
know
that's the thing. It's just like, but they're just like, I listen to John Piper. Okay, it's like I know that I'm holy, so
yeah. And I'm like, I'm sorry, where is it in the Bible that says everything that comes out of John Piper's mouth is the correct interpretation?
My God, there's been or like,
show me that verse.
Yeah, John Piper 1 or 2 John Piper. There is like even I think that's where even like so many well-meaning, polite moderates love to live.
Yeah.
Is in this space of, just like they want so badly to start moving in a certain direction, but it's because of that marriage or that need for like white heteronormative Christian approval that looks a very certain way that we don't make any progress. And so like even like I sit in like the pews of the church that I attend right now, and like some weeks are spot on because we're talking about racial justice, we're talking about poverty, we're talking about women, we're doing all like, it's like this is the week that we're going good, and then like we'll have a week it's like we're gonna talk about sex this week, and I'm just like, oh fuck.
Yeah.
Like I'm just like, and like there's like no, it's not just, it's like they want to play the game in certain areas, but they don't want to, like they won't fully jump into, because like I think like the Reformation that we're all kind of longing for is not going to be one that is or at least a reformation or an awakening or a revival, as we used to say. Like if we're talking about a revival,
I love a good revival,
girl, I'm ready for a revival. And like like it's like I don't want a revival because like that kind of that makes me think that we're going back to something that we've lost, and I'm just like, no, like you know, it's this idea of reformation or even resurrection. I would take that because like
when I was a kid, my dad preached at a revival every summer. It was a scheduled revival that happened at the same time.
A scheduled revival. That's going to be this episode's context.
Go preach at the annual revival. My dad would every summer, and it was always out in this like barn in the middle of nowhere that had no air conditioning. So we had those like old school fans with Jesus on them, like you know the ones with white Jesus on the fans. And then, like,
the hand fans.
Yeah, the hand fans on the Bible verse on the back, and you'd like fan yourself with them. And there was like always a tornado in the week, like because we were like in Illinois. Man, when I think of revival, I think of the annual revival out in the barn with the Jesus fans.
The Jesus fans. But like that's like the one thing like I'd really want to see is just like white moderate pastors, and just white moderate Christians in general getting to this place where it's not just about your one thing. Like it's not just like, oh, I finally figured out what Black Lives Matter means, I'm woke. But like it's like a continuous commitment and recommitment to the collective liberation of oppressed beings, and not just humans, but how we treat animals, how we treat our environment. Like, because like, what does it say? The entire earth is crying out, and I think like, you know, we're on the cusp of that, and like, the
earth is telling us she's tapped out.
Yeah. So we're going to send a whole bunch of hurricanes and knock your shit out.
Yeah.
And you know, it's going to be, I mean, interesting is the word that I always go to when like I don't want to assign like the word bad or good to it.
Yeah. No, I think that's true though. No, you look at the crazy stuff happening climate wise, and like if you don't look at that and go, oh my God, this is nature telling us like we have gone too far. Like, and I don't mean that in like a God sent Hurricane Katrina to punish New Orleans way. I mean like when you throw a bunch of crap into the air, the temperature goes up and then storms get worse. Like that's science, right? Like, and so this is the earth saying like, we need to slow down.
Yeah. It's going to be a time. I'm trying to think like, there's like one other thing I wanted to.
Purity culture.
Yeah.
Bisexuality coming out.
Yeah, if we could, so real quick, to do like a pivot, I guess, to just like we kind of like have touched on purity culture a little bit here and there, but like, for someone who doesn't know, like, or is unaware of what purity culture is defined as, like, give me a quick little definition.
Yes. Okay, so purity culture is the belief. There's a lot of tangential beliefs, but I would say at the core, purity culture is the belief that in order to not be sinning against God, everybody has to be compulsorily abstinent from all sexual contact unless and until they enter into a monogamous heterosexual marriage from which they can never get a divorce. Like, it's the belief, compulsory abstinence until heterosexual marriage is what I would sum purity culture up as. Now there's tangential beliefs around that surrounding like being anti-LGBT, and then there's like the whole brand of like modesty culture around purity culture where like women have to dress a certain way to not cause men to stumble. And there's a whole bunch of like tangential like bubbles, I would say, off of it, but I would say the core is compulsory abstinence until heterosexual marriage.
Yeah. And there was something interesting that started coming up. What's his name?
Who's his name?
Johnny, what's his face, who wrote I Kissed Dating Goodbye?
Oh, Josh Harris.
So Josh Harris is like creating a documentary.
Oh my God, yeah. He wanted like $30,000 on Kickstarter.
Did he raise it ever?
I don't know. Can we Google that?
I'm gonna Google that.
Okay, Google it and find out. No, so he was asking for like $30,000 to like, and for people to basically create free content for them too. Like he wanted people to like send him videos and like send him stories and all this stuff. And I was like, like I'm a person that markets myself on the internet. I know what you're doing. You're getting yourself free content and copy without having to write stuff. But he wanted $30,000 and a whole bunch of people's stories so that he could discover the impact of his stuff later on. Because so a couple years ago, he started to interact with people on Twitter. Like somebody tweeted at him like, hey, I wasn't allowed to go to prom because of your book. And he was like, I'm sorry. And then like, there was a couple other like media things that he did where it made it seem like he was sort of possibly going to be like maybe rethinking some of the stuff that he did. But in the description of the Kickstarter, then he comes out with this Kickstarter and he's like, I still like, he basically still holds to like the conservative position. He pretty much admitted to it and was like, and I'm like, I don't really care if you like, because some of the people think that like the problem with purity culture was like how it was explained, right? Because there was a lot of people who were like really aggressive about it, right? And they would go on these speaking tours and say like, if you have sex before marriage, you're like chewed up gum and you're like unsticky tape that doesn't stick anymore, and you're a present opened and nobody wants to reopen a present that's already been and all this like really like aggressive sort of gross stuff, right? And some people think that like that's the problem with purity culture, is that like people took this teaching that was like inherently good and just kind of ran with it and like didn't put enough emphasis on like grace and the fact that like God could forgive you and you're not ruined forever and blah blah blah, right? Yeah. And I'm like, that's not the problem with purity culture. Like the problem with purity culture is purity culture. The problem with purity culture is the teaching. Like whether you're
the actual content itself,
whether you're nice about it or mean about it, I don't really care. And so I was like, I don't really want Joshua Harris to have $30,000 to tell me that like I'm still sinning, but in a nicer way, you know? Did it work? What's Google say?
Unfortunately, yeah. So, and they met and exceeded their goal, and apparently
Why?
they're trying. Because purity culture run deep.
Can people with disposable income support something else?
Yeah, support me or Emily with your disposable income. You know what? Because we out here trying to make the world a better place. We
won't tell you you're sinners. Yeah, well, we probably will, but not for that.
Yeah, you know, your racism, your heterosexism, all that stuff, your biphobia. We're totally going to call you out on that. But you know what? You can still eat dinner with us. We'll still share a drink with you, and like we'll help you work through that. But like my biggest critique of, and like I think this is also one of yours, is like, again, content is bullshit. But then on top of that is that the creators of I Kissed Dating Goodbye, like they're not willing to sit down with people who have an like the critical lens that you and I do, or actually sit down and hear the stories of people like you and I. And it says right here, like in like the little captions, this is 20 years after I Kissed Dating Goodbye, Joshua Harris encounters critics and fans on his quest for new insight into Christian dating. And like, it's not even about Christian dating. It is about the fact that
was what's funny, that he made that book like it was about dating, right? Because like dating, I guess his beef was like dating when you get in a car with somebody of the opposite sex and then you like go park in a movie theater and make out, like I guess and he was like, that's the problem. And it's like, that book wasn't even about dating. Like,
yeah, that dating was about,
that book was about
what you do with your body. Yeah.
Like, and dating is a relatively recent like construct, right? Like dating and practice in America is like relatively recent and the sum total of human history, but like that's not really what we're hung up on.
Yeah. And like, I'm thinking about just like how I'm still thinking of like things like John Eldredge, just like Captivated and what was the one for dudes? Of course I would remember the one for girls.
Wild at Heart.
Wild at Heart. That's it.
Yeah.
But just like all these things that are not just like steeped in just about dating, but just like about sexuality and gender, and it's like it's all patriarchy rewrapped in like a beautiful bow and good branding, and because it's
and
good.
I'm like, your website is fancy, but your theology sucks.
And ain't that always the way though? Like I looked at the Nashville statement. I'm just like,
their website was so great though. That was my biggest. I was like looking at it and I was like,
I'm like, which one of you assholes out there who's probably a queer also designed this website and took the money?
I know. And I was like, but should I take money from them? But like, God, it was such a wreck. But the website was so fancy. I remember that was my first thought when I saw the Nashville statement, because the Nashville statement itself was nothing new. Like there was no original content in that whatsoever. I scrolled through and I was like, oh, same old. But I was like, this website.
But this website though, I'm just like, that's really the true betrayal out there, is because all of us designers out here were just like, who did this?
Somebody did that.
Yeah, well, there's a special place in figurative hell for people like that.
What is done in the darkness will come to light.
Yes, God, come through. On the other side of forever, like, Paul's going to be waiting. Or who's at the gate of heaven, apparently?
Peter, I think.
Peter going to be standing there just like, oh,
I know
hello.
you designed the Nashville statement website.
It's like, you did really good and you repented, but just like, oh, you designed that Nashville statement website, didn't you? and then he's going to be like, my bad. He's like, oh, okay, come have a drink. You're fine. Lord. Well, I don't want to keep you because we're getting close to an hour. I've really, really enjoyed chatting with you and catching and like really like having time to pick your brain and catch up on so many things after 2 years of us being friends.
I know. How's your mental health? Because mine's a lot better 2 years later.
Oh, that's real. Yeah. So I'm able to focus on things that are not my sexuality. So that's cool.
Yeah. I'm in therapy. I'm going to yoga teacher training. I'm like, I don't know. I don't have panic attacks anymore. We're doing good.
Gosh. Same thing. Okay. So here's the tea. So I used to get migraines all the time from the time I was a teen, which was like right around when I started figuring out that I was attracted to boys. Like I would get migraines like almost on a monthly basis. And after I came out, I haven't had a migraine in 2 years. Mm-hmm. And
yeah, I used to have panic attacks like on a multi panic attack a week basis. And especially in the last year, I've had a couple in the last year, but like really reasonable ones. Like for example, on November 8th. Good God, yeah. Like when anybody would have had a panic attack, right? But like other than like super duper like, oh, this makes complete sense. Like I have not had them with anything near the frequency that I used to, and I'm like, this is probably because I'm like being myself and like getting help and like moving my body and like eating a vegetable occasionally and like not speaking to toxic people, like all. And it's like, wow, so crazy. Like when you follow good advice and you do things that are healthy for you, your body stops rebelling against you. What the hell?
Yeah, that's like a big thing too, is like I use that block button and that unfollow and unfriend button liberally. Because it's just like, and then like every now and again I'll have a person like reach out to me and say like, why did you unfriend me? And it's like, because you probably said something on the internet that was triggering and I don't want that in my newsfeed. People, if you're listening to this, it's okay to block your friends or people who might be sort of your friends but not really your friends anymore because you've progressed to a higher plane of understanding.
Yeah. Well, and I try to have like sometimes like I get, I don't know, this is like another tangent, but I get like I get kind of upset when people like sort of downplay social media conversation about stuff, because I'm like, you're probably, if you're arguing with like a terrible person, you're probably not going to convince them. But when you do that, there's like 10 other people watching, right? Yeah. Who are not liking, who are just silently. I was that person for years. I just watched these conversations go down. And that's how I learned a lot of the things that I've learned in the last couple of years, has been by just watching conversations between other people. So I'm like, I want those conversations to take place, but I'm also like, it's not your job to like educate somebody who says you're going to hell. So I don't know. There's some people that I'll have conversations with. But like, there's some people that I won't. I don't know. I feel like it's a thing that like needs discretion on, but I feel like for the most part, people don't block enough.
Yeah. That's my belief. It's just like, And also, like, I think it's just like the people who like, well, I think about this as like the people who need my content will find it,
Uh-huh.
and the people who are gonna troll my content, I don't need them around. So,
Mm-hmm.
before we hang up, I did have like one more question.
Okay.
But it's probably like maybe for a whole different time. The word bisexual versus like the word queer. Like,
Yes.
I don't know why I didn't think of that sooner. Like,
Yeah.
why bisexual and not queer? Because everyone's lessons or reasons are different. I'm just curious.
I use queer sometimes, and this is an ongoing conversation with myself that I have, because I think so. Sometimes I say queer when I don't want to say bi, and I think that's internalized biphobia on my part. Like, as I think about it later, I'm like, oh, I just didn't want to say bisexual because like I have my own internalized shit to deal with, right?
Yeah.
For 20 plus years of growing up in a biphobic society, right? So
Right.
So you have to deal with that stuff. Even like you can have internalized stuff that causes you to be like oppressive towards yourself, I guess, you know? I'm like, sometimes I just say queer because I don't want to say bi because I'm dealing with my internalized biphobia. And that's an ongoing journey and an ongoing conversation I'm having with myself. However, I don't know, sometimes because there's biphobia also within the queer community.
Yeah.
Sometimes I say queer, like, if I feel like that will shield me from having questions asked or like being judged, I guess. Cause I've had I have had people who are not bi who have questioned like what, like who like ask me questions trying to ascertain if I'm like queer enough, I guess,
Yeah.
like, do you really mean this? Like, I don't know. Like some people think that like queer identity is like a trendy club.
Yeah.
That people want to be in, and so they'll like lie about their sexuality in order to like be in the club. Which is like also internalized biphobia and queerphobia, right? I think I used to judge people like that like a few years ago and maybe like have those questions like silently to myself. But I think it was also like my own internalized stuff at the time too, so like there's a whole lot of things that go into it. I think sometimes it is my internalized stuff, but sometimes I feel like because there is biphobia within the queer community, like sometimes I don't want to have questions asked, or like I've had queer people refer to me as an ally before, that sort of thing, where it's like, but then I have to, I have to go back and explain the thing of like, I'm married to a dude, right? But like, this is still my identity,
right?
And sometimes that feels like a lot of emotional work.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
I feel like I relate in some way, because like I sometimes like, I like publicly identify as gay. I say gay and queer, because like if I'm going, cause like again, depending on the circles I'm talking to, it is much easier for, heteronormative Christianity to just like, oh, Kevin's gay. That makes sense to me. Dude on dude.
Yeah.
But then
yeah.
But then if I say something like, oh, I'm queer, like, oh, what does that mean? I said, well,
yeah.
For me, like I am mostly attracted to men or cisgender men, but then also I found myself attracted to trans men, trans women, non-binary folk, queer women who are more masculine presenting, and like I have all these different kinds of weird places, and that's not strictly homosexuality, or being gay, like so like for me, like that kind of like in between, or that kind of ambiguity for me helps out a lot. But then at the same time I wonder, it's like, or does that mean, because like bisexuality means I'm attracted to genders like myself and not like myself, so does that mean I'm actually bisexual and I'm just not owning up to it because of my own internalized biphobia? And then at the same time, if I am feeling somewhat gender fluid, does that mean that I'm strictly like, that still falls under the bisexual umbrella? So it's like, what do I do with that? I don't know about you,
but like I experience my bisexuality like very differently depending like on like the day or the week. Like I find it feels different to me on a day by day and a week by week basis. Like some weeks I'm like, I'm attracted to like all the women in the whole world. I love women, blah, blah, blah. But then other times I'm like, I'm really attracted to dudes. Like it very much is like, it's very flowy and wibbly wobbly, and like
Yeah.
You
And I
know,
think
ebbs
that's
and
like
flows
that,
over time.
and that's how I feel like, because like this week I'm currently wearing what one may like Will and Grace, but in 1998, to make a pop culture reference in a moment. So like,
I didn't get to watch Will and Grace. I wasn't allowed.
Oh, neither was I. And so like the new one came out, and like I watched the new episode with my boyfriend, and I cracked up. That shit's funny, man.
I feel like I feel like I was like, everybody is talking about it, but I was like, is this even going to make sense to me if I watch it? I feel like I have to watch all the other like 8 seasons from the 90s in order for it to make any sense.
There's also an episode on the Nancy podcast where they talk about it, and kind of give you like, this is what it was, this is how it was problematic, this is like, but like this is why people still love it. Let's see what happens.
Maybe that would be helpful if I just watched, or if I just listened to that to like catch up real quick.
And it's only like a 28-minute episode, so it's
catch up on 8 years of pop culture.
Yeah, so I think, but then like I watched like the very first episode of like season 1, episode 1 from 1998, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I own jeans just like that. And so like I put them on today, and like I'm wearing boots and like just a plain t-shirt, and now I'm gonna go move my stuff from my old apartment. So I'm feeling hella butch. But then like I go to a space like GCN where there's like a permission to be super gay. I queen out. And so it's like the same sort of thing. It's like depending on the circumstance, depending on the day of the week.
Yeah. Well, and I would say now that you mentioned that, I'm probably most likely to use the word queer in like queer spaces, and probably most likely to use like bisexual. Like I use bisexual a lot when I go and like speak places. I wonder why that is. That's a thing that I should look into. Just try to observe myself neutrally without judging, because I'm in yoga teacher training.
Yes, please. Oh my gosh. I'm currently doing a yoga thing with one of my friends, Abby Robbins. And
I'm doing it too, Kevin.
Oh my gosh. Observing myself right now, I'm just like...
Yeah. Is that not so hard? Well, here, Abby, if you're listening, this is me neutrally observing my thoughts and feelings without passing judgment on them.
Look at us. We're just... Abby, do you want to be on my podcast? Great. I'll see you soon.
That was my conversation with my friend Emily Joy. You can find her on all social media at Emily Joy Poetry, on her website emilyjoypoetry.com, and you can find her spoken word album, All Prodigal Daughters and Sons, on Bandcamp and on her website. That's everything for this week. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back next week with some dope conversations for sure. Be sure to connect with me at thekevingarcia.com, and if you want to leave some comments or some feedback, that's where you can do it. And honestly, I'd love to hear from you. So if you have any ideas for future shows, people you want me to interview, people you want to put me in contact with, you can do that through the website. It's pretty simple. You know how to use the internet, right? You are listening to a podcast right now. And also, another word about the whole sustaining partnership thing. If you believe that this work is important, if this conversation was life-giving to you, you should support it, because it's what we need to do in these hard times. And to do that, you can simply go to thekevingarcia.com/support, or you can go to patreon.com/thekevingarcia and learn how you can become a sustaining partner. Remember, if you want to get in on the Reconnect Devo, you need to subscribe and become a patron before the 1st of November. You got me? Cool. And on top of that, if you don't have the quan to just support people willy-nilly, because I know some people are counting pennies like me sometimes, do me a favor. Go to iTunes and rate the show. Leave 5 stars. Tell people what you think of it. Share it on social media. That's an easy way to support the show and the work we're doing here, because honestly, reviewing it does help get the show in front of people, and sharing, obviously, the videos and the blogs gets it in front of people as well. So do that for me if you don't mind. Lord knows we need more safe places for queer people and progressive humans. Am I right? That's it. That's all from me. So thanks so much. Go see your therapist, do some yoga, take a walk, go get your nails done, go dancing, eat something delicious, and don't count the calories. Unless like that's the season you're in right now, in which case like I fully support what you're doing. So you do you, boo-boo. Anyways, I'll see you in Chicago, and remember, my friends, God loves you, so you should love you as well. My name is Kevin Garcia. This has been another episode of A Tiny Revolution, and I'll talk to you next week. Bye. Mwah.
Just leave a note, just like, if you find me dead with a bingo card in my hand.
Please no, it was because I read too many Gospel Coalition articles.